For 7 long winters, Ilara lived alone at the edge of the pine forest, where snow blanketed her cabin like a secret the world had forgotten. The silence had become her companion, soft, heavy, and faithful. She'd built her days around it, chopping wood before dawn, mending her worn quilt by the fire, and whispering small prayers to no one in particular before she slept. Life had grown still, almost peaceful, until that night, the night someone knocked at her door. It was late. The wind howled like a wounded animal outside, and the logs in the fireplace were burning low. At first, she thought she imagined it, a sound that didn't belong in her quiet world. But then came another knock, sharper, desperate. Ilara hesitated. No one ever came this far into the woods, not in winter. She stood, heart pounding, and reached for the old rifle hanging above the mantel. When she opened the door, the sight before her stole her breath. A man stood there, tall and rugged, his coat torn, snow clinging to his hat and shoulders. In his arms, wrapped in a thin blanket, was a child, a baby no older than a year. The man's eyes were wild with exhaustion, but filled with something even deeper, fear. "Please," he said, his voice rough and trembling. "Can we stay one night?" Ilara froze. Her mind raced. She hadn't spoken to another soul in months. The man could be dangerous. But then the baby stirred and whimpered, and Ilara's heart softened in an instant. She nodded silently and stepped aside. The man carried the baby in, his boots leaving melting trails across her wooden floor. She shut the door against the storm and guided him to the fire. As the warmth spread through the room, she saw the baby's tiny fingers grasping at the air. The child's cheeks were red from the cold, eyes half closed with sleep. "You'll both freeze if you'd stayed out there any longer," she murmured, setting a kettle on the stove. "Thank you," the man replied, his voice barely audible. "We didn't have anywhere else to go." Ilara studied him quietly as he fed the fire. He looked like a man who had seen too much, scratches on his hands, a bruise on his temple. The baby's small bag sat beside him, and something about the way he held her, protective, desperate, told Ilara he wasn't lying. "What's her name?" Ilara asked softly. "Lena," he said, looking down at the child. "My daughter." The kettle began to whistle, filling the room with warmth and sound. Ilara poured 2 cups of tea, then watched the man sip slowly, his hands shaking. He didn't speak much. He didn't have to. The silence between them carried all the words neither knew how to say. As the hours passed, Ilara found herself watching the baby's gentle breathing, the man's tired face softening in the glow of firelight. For the first time in years, her cabin didn't feel empty. Later, when she brought out extra blankets, she noticed something, faded bloodstains on the man's sleeve. "You're hurt," she said, her voice sharper now. He froze. Then slowly he looked up. "It's not mine." The room seemed to shrink around them. Ilara's hand tightened around the blanket. "Then whose is it?" He looked at the baby, then away. That was when the fear crept in. Not for herself, but for the child. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, something far more dangerous had begun to stir. And yet, even as every instinct screamed to send him away, Ilara found herself whispering instead, "You both can stay, just for tonight." But deep down she knew, this was no ordinary traveler, and that knock at her door had changed everything. By morning, the storm had softened into a gentle snowfall. Ilara woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of quiet humming. The stranger was already up, sitting by the fire, cradling his daughter in his arms. For a fleeting moment, it looked like a picture of peace. But then she saw it, the man's pack on the table, half open. Inside, something glinted metallic. Ilara's heart skipped. She took a step closer, careful not to make a sound. It was a revolver, clean, polished. Beside it lay a folded photograph of a woman smiling with the baby in her arms. Ilara felt her throat tighten. The man looked up suddenly, catching her stare. Their eyes locked, and for a long moment neither spoke. Finally he sighed and said, "You should know the truth." He told her his name was Daniel. He'd been running for days, not from the law, but from the men who took his wife's life. She had been caught in the crossfire of a deal gone wrong, something Daniel had tried to walk away from years ago. Now those men wanted him dead, and the baby too, to finish what they started. Ilara listened in silence, every word heavy as snow. She saw the truth in his eyes, the kind of pain that can't be faked. But she also saw something else, guilt. "Why come here?" she asked quietly. "Because you live off the maps," he said. "Because no one would think to look for us here." Ilara looked toward the frosted window. She'd chosen this place to escape her own ghosts. An accident that took her husband years ago, leaving her with nothing but silence. And now fate had sent her someone else running from grief. The day passed slowly. She fed them, repaired his coat, and watched the baby giggle at the falling snow. Somewhere deep inside, something long buried began to stir. Something like purpose. That night, just as they began to settle again, the sound of hooves echoed faintly through the woods. Daniel stiffened instantly. Ilara moved to the window and saw faint lights weaving between the trees. "They found us," he whispered. Within moments, the cabin turned tense. Daniel checked his revolver. Ilara grabbed her rifle. The baby whimpered softly, sensing the storm that was about to break again. When the riders approached, Ilara's heart pounded like thunder. There were 3 of them, their shadows cutting through the snow. One shouted Daniel's name, voice cold and cruel. Daniel whispered, "If anything happens, take her, please." Before she could answer, the first gunshot shattered the night. Chaos erupted. Daniel pushed Ilara down as glass burst above them. He fired once, twice, each shot echoing through the forest. When the smoke cleared, one rider lay still. The others fled into the dark. But Daniel was bleeding. He fell to his knees, clutching his side, eyes glazed with pain. Ilara caught him before he fell completely. "Don't let her grow up alone," he whispered. "Not like you did." And then with a final exhale, his body went still. The baby cried softly in her arms, the firelight flickering across her tiny face. Ilara held her close, tears falling silently. The storm had ended, but inside, the echoes of that night would never fade. In the years that followed, no one came searching again. The forest reclaimed its peace. But if you walked far enough into the pines, you'd find a cabin with a woman and a child, their laughter rising into the cold mountain air. Ilara never spoke of that night, but she knew that sometimes fate knocks when you least expect it, carrying both sorrow and salvation in its arms. And from that night on, she never lived alone again.